Thanksgiving is supposed to be about family, right? About gratitude and stuffing your face until you're too full to even think about getting up from the table. At least, that's what I used to believe before this year blew it all to pieces. My name's Adam, I'm 27, and until that night, I honestly thought I could still find some shred of normalcy with my mom's side of the family. It wasn't like I didn't know they had their issues. My uncle had a gambling problem that everyone pretended didn't exist. My aunt loved to whisper everyone's dirty laundry to anyone who'd listen, and my cousins, well, let's just say calling them entitled would have been putting it kindly. But they were still family. They were the people who used to pass me the mashed potatoes and kiss my forehead at Christmas, and I kept clinging to this stupid, outdated hope that somewhere deep down, they still cared about me, too. This year, they invited me to Aunt Carol's house for Thanksgiving. It was supposed to be a fresh start, according to her text, complete with a bunch of emojis and fake excitement. Part of me didn't want to go, but another part, the dumb, optimistic part, thought, maybe this time would be different. Maybe I wouldn't leave feeling like an outsider they barely tolerated. I even baked a pumpkin pie from scratch, something my mom used to do before she passed away a few years ago. It felt right, honoring her memory like that. I showed up right on time, pie in hand, trying to brush off the tiny pit of dread growing in my stomach. The first sign that things were off came the moment I walked through the door. Everyone turned to look at me, and then immediately turned away, like I was just some delivery guy who'd walked into the wrong house. No greetings. No hugs. No, hey, Adam, glad you could make it. Just silence, except for my cousin Travis, who gave me a slow, mocking clap before going back to his conversation. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forced a smile, and made my way to the kitchen to drop off the pie. Dinner itself wasn't much better. I got stuck at the very end of the table, crammed between the coat rack and a wobbly chair that looked like it might give out if I breathed too hard. Plates were passed around, but somehow, mine always came to me already half empty. When I reached for the gravy boat, Aunt Carol accidentally knocked it off the table. It splattered all over my shirt, and everyone burst out laughing. I laughed too, but it felt hollow, brittle. I excused myself to the bathroom to clean up, staring at my reflection in the mirror, wondering why I kept doing this to myself. By the time dessert rolled around, I decided to call it a night. I figured I'd make a quick exit, go home, and try to salvage what was left of the evening with some bad Netflix movies and maybe a frozen pizza. As I pulled my coat off the rack, I slipped my hand into my pocket for my keys and froze. My wallet was missing. My stomach dropped. I dug through my other pockets, patted down my coat, even checked the floor. Nothing. A sick, creeping feeling started to crawl up my spine. I forced myself to stay calm and walked back into the living room. Most of the family was sprawled out on couches, watching some football game, half asleep from the food coma. Travis caught my eye and smirked. "Something wrong, Adam?" he asked, his voice using fake concern. "Yeah," I said tightly. "My wallet's gone. Has anyone seen it?" For a second, the room was dead silent. Then someone, my other cousin Jess, snorted into her drink. Uncle Rick muttered something about me always making a scene. Aunt Carol sighed loudly, like I was just exhausting her by existing. But it was Travis who spoke up again, flashing that smirk that made me want to put my fist through the wall. "Maybe you just misplaced it," he said. "Wouldn't be the first time, right?" I gritted my teeth. I didn't misplace it. Travis leaned back, kicked his feet up on the coffee table, and gave a lazy stretch. "Or maybe," he said casually, "you're just upset 'cause you're broke, and you're looking for someone to blame." I stared at him, feeling the blood pound in my ears. Every instinct in me screamed to just walk out, to leave before I did something I couldn't take back. But something about his smugness, the way the whole family seemed to be silently backing him up, made something inside me snap. Without saying a word, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I figured maybe my credit card was still safe. Maybe I could cancel my debit card and deal with the headache later. I wish I hadn't looked. My savings account, my carefully built emergency fund that I'd spent years growing, was wiped clean. Zero. Not a cent left. For a second, I thought maybe it was a glitch. A mistake. But then Travis leaned over, craning his neck to peek at my screen, and laughed. "Oops," he said, shrugging. "Guess you should have set a better password, cousin." The room erupted into laughter again. Even Aunt Carol chuckled behind her glass. It felt like the air got sucked out of my lungs. My hands were trembling as I shoved my phone back into my pocket and grabbed my coat for real this time. I didn't trust myself to speak. I didn't trust myself not to start screaming. As I stormed toward the door, Travis called after me. "Hey, Adam." I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. Think of it as our bonus for putting up with you all these years. The laughter was deafening. My vision blurred. For a second, I considered just walking out, pretending this was some bad dream I could wake up from. But then I remembered something. Something important. And as the rage cooled into something sharper, colder, I turned back toward them, forcing a smile. Then you'll appreciate what's coming next, I said softly. They laughed even harder, like it was the best joke they'd heard all night. I walked out without another word, letting the door slam behind me. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it also cleared my head. I leaned against my car, pulling out my phone again, not to call the bank, not to text a friend. No, I opened a different app, the one I downloaded months ago but never thought I'd need to use. See, what they didn't know, what they had never bothered to find out, was that I'd started working part-time for a financial security company last year, helping them beta test a new anti-fraud system. As part of the agreement, I'd been required to install a tracker on all my banking apps and devices, a tracker that could trace unauthorized access, pinpoint locations, and generate evidence admissible in court. And oh, boy, did I have evidence. I filed the report in less than 5 minutes. The officer on the emergency line was polite but firm. "Stay on the scene," he said. "We're sending a unit now." I didn't have to wait long. Less than 10 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed at the end of the block. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs as I watched 2 squad cars pull up, headlights slicing through the dark. Doors slammed. Boots crunched against the gravel. I stayed by my car, arms crossed, as they approached the house. Then came the pounding on the door. Inside, I could hear the muffled confusion, the hurried footsteps, the sharp voices rising in alarm. Travis' voice was the loudest. I heard Aunt Carol's shrill, panicked shriek. The door finally creaked open, and the officers stepped inside. The door hadn't even fully swung open before one of the officers barked out, "Everyone stay where you are." Their voices cut through the thick haze of laughter and confusion inside, replacing it with a thick, crackling tension that was almost delicious to listen to from where I stood. I stayed outside, leaning casually against my car as the living room lights blazed. Through the wide front window, I could see my family, my so-called family, freeze like a bunch of guilty kids caught stealing from a cookie jar. Except this time, it wasn't cookies they'd taken. It was thousands of dollars, my future, my security, my trust. The second officer, a woman with a no-nonsense posture, began rattling off questions. "Who lives at this residence? We have reports of unauthorized access to a personal bank account traced to this location." Uncle Rick puffed up like a balloon about to pop. "There must be some mistake. We're good people. Family gathering, that's all." The officer didn't even blink. "Good people don't transfer savings out of someone else's account." Then she added, almost conversationally, "especially not using IP addresses registered to this address." I almost laughed out loud at the way Aunt Carol's face twisted at that. She clutched her pearls, literally clutched them like some bad soap opera villain, while Jess and Travis exchanged frantic looks that screamed we're so screwed. One of the officers pulled out a tablet and scrolled through it, his expression unreadable. "We have transaction records, device signatures, login timestamps, enough for multiple counts of wire fraud." Travis, brilliant, wonderful Travis, had the nerve to actually roll his eyes. "Come on, it was just a joke. It's not like he needed it." The room fell deathly silent. Even the TV had been muted, the forgotten football game a ghostly background on the screen. "You accessed someone else's financial accounts without permission, and you stole funds," the officer said, voice sharp now. "That's not a prank. That's a felony." The gravity of the situation finally seemed to hit Jess first. She started crying immediately, loud gulping sobs that were more about fear for herself than any regret. Aunt Carol tried to jump in, waving her arms and shrieking about misunderstandings and family loyalty. Uncle Rick kept muttering something about talking it out and no need for drama. I stayed where I was, letting it all unfold without stepping in to save them. Not this time. I owed them nothing. Then one of the officers said, "We need to speak with the victim." "Is Adam still here?" I raised a hand lazily from beside my car. "Right here, officer." Both officers turned to me with nods. Their faces softened just a fraction when they saw me, and the younger one motioned me over. "You the account holder?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Adam Mitchell. You've been cooperative so far, and based on the evidence you submitted, you have grounds to press full charges." I nodded slowly, deliberately. I could feel every pair of eyes from inside the house drilling into me, practically begging me not to. Aunt Carol even took a few staggering steps toward the door, her hands pressed together like she was about to start praying. "Adam, honey," she said in a trembling voice, "you don't want to do this. We're family." Something inside me snapped, but not in anger this time. In clarity. I stepped closer to the porch so they could all hear me, see me. "You stole from me," I said, my voice low but steady. "You laughed about it. You made me feel like garbage, again. This time, I'm not sweeping it under the rug so you can pretend it never happened." I turned to the officers. "Yes, I want to press charges." The silence that followed was thicker than gravy, thicker than the lump in Aunt Carol's throat as she stared at me, realizing that for the first time, their manipulation wasn't going to work. They couldn't guilt-trip their way out of this. "All right," the officer said briskly, pulling out cuffs. "Travis Mitchell, Jessica Mitchell, Rick Spencer, you're under arrest for unauthorized access and theft. You have the right to remain silent." The reading of their rights faded into a background hum as I watched the scene unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Travis cursed under his breath, but the officers ignored him. Just tried to cling to Aunt Carol, sobbing hysterically as they cuffed her. Uncle Rick looked pale and shaken, like he might faint. Aunt Carol made one last desperate lunge toward me, stopping just short of grabbing my arm. "Please, Adam," she begged. "We were just struggling. Rick's gambling. Jess's debts. We thought you could spare it." I stared at her for a long moment, weighing everything she had ever said and done to me. The constant belittling. The fake smiles. The way they never once offered me help or support when I needed it most. "You should have asked," I said coldly. "But you never did you? You just took." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. I turned away from her, refusing to let her see even a flicker of emotion cross my face. As they were led one by one into the squad cars, the neighborhood began to stir. Curtains twitched. Front porch lights flickered on. Curious whispers floated through the chilly night air. Let them see, I thought. Let them all see what happens when you treat someone like dirt and expect them to stay silent forever. I sat in my car after the officers left, engine off, just breathing. For the first time in years, maybe longer, I felt something crack open inside me, not sadness, not anger. Relief. Freedom. But that wasn't even the end of it. Because the real consequences hadn't even started yet. And trust me, they were about to lose a whole lot more than just a Thanksgiving dinner. The squad cars disappeared down the street, their red and blue lights fading into the night like the closing scene of a movie. For a long time, I just sat there in the driver's seat, letting the silence wrap around me like a blanket. My fingers were still trembling, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was something sharper. Anticipation. Because while they thought this nightmare ended with a few arrests and a slap on the wrist, they had no idea how deep the hole they just dug really was. See, when I agreed to help beta test that financial security program last year, part of the deal wasn't just tracking fraud, it was also mandatory reporting. That meant the case didn't just stay local. It got flagged. Flagged to their banks. Flagged to credit reporting agencies. Flagged to every institution that cared about words like embezzlement and fraudulent activity. And these weren't exactly small charges. Between the dollar amount stolen and the digital paper trail they left like a bunch of drunk elephants, it wasn't just a slap on the wrist they were facing. It was federal. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Aunt Carol's front window. Her silhouette stood there, frozen, watching me leave. Maybe she thought she could fix this. Maybe she thought she'd talk to a few people, guilt-trip a few more, and smooth it all over like she always had. She was wrong. I drove home on autopilot, my mind buzzing with everything that had just happened and what was about to. I barely slept that night, even though I should have felt triumphant. The truth is, part of me still mourned what I thought family was supposed to be. That small, foolish part clung to memories of Christmas mornings and birthday parties and summers spent running through sprinklers with my cousins, back before money poisoned everything. But when the sun rose and my phone started lighting up, that feeling died for good. First came the calls. Unknown numbers. Private numbers. Voicemails that swung wildly between begging and threatening. "Adam, it's your Aunt Carol. Please call me back. We can fix this. It's not too late. Adam, this is Rick. You better think twice about what you're doing. Family's supposed to stick together. Adam, it's Jess. I'm sorry, okay? I'm really sorry. Can you just tell the police it was a misunderstanding? Please? Please." I let them all go to voicemail. I wasn't interested in playing therapist for the people who thought my life savings were some kind of tip jar. Then came the real fallout. Within 48 hours, their bank accounts were frozen under investigation. Aunt Carol's mortgage lender got spooked when the fraud charges popped up and flagged her loan for reassessment. Uncle Rick's employer, he worked at a mid-sized construction firm, got wind of his arrest and strongly encouraged him to resign. Jess, who was supposed to start a new job the following Monday, found her offer rescinded when her background check turned up pending felony charges. And Travis? Oh, Travis got it the worst. Turns out, he had been bragging online for months about hustling money from stupid relatives on shady forums. Screenshots surfaced. Chat logs were submitted as additional evidence. The financial security company I worked with even offered to pursue civil charges on top of the criminal ones for damages, legal fees, and restitution. Their little bonus turned into a five-figure debt almost overnight. Meanwhile, I moved on with my life. Quieter. Smarter. I opened new accounts. Switched banks. Upgraded my home security system. It wasn't paranoia. It was learning the hard way that sometimes the people you think you can trust will hurt you worse than any stranger ever could. Still, the story wasn't done. About a week after Thanksgiving, when the cold had truly settled into the bones of the town and Christmas lights twinkled like tiny lies on every porch, I got a letter in the mail. No stamp. No return address. Just shoved through the mail slot like a dirty secret someone didn't want traced back to them. Inside was a handwritten note on cheap, lined notebook paper. You ruined us. I hope you're happy. We're your family. You'll regret this. We always come back for our own. No signature. Just that. For a long time, I stood there in the front hallway, turning the paper over in my hands. It would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. Even after everything, they still thought they were the victims. I didn't call the police. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because by then, the gears were already turning on something they couldn't stop. Remember how Aunt Carol had inherited Grandpa Mitchell's house years ago, the big family estate everyone used to gather at before things turned toxic? What nobody knew was that the inheritance had a catch. If the heir faced felony charges before the mortgage was paid off, the property reverted back to a charitable trust Grandpa had quietly set up. Guess who filed to enforce the trust conditions the second the felony charges stuck? I didn't even need to lift a finger. The bank handled it. The lawyers handled it. The sheriff's office posted the notice on her door in the middle of December, right under the sad, drooping wreath she had probably put up without realizing how ironic it would look. Foreclosure. Property seizure. Auction. Everything they had built their fake little empire on gone. Word got around town fast. People who had once pretended not to notice their nasty behavior suddenly had plenty to say. Aunt Carol, who once swan through church like she owned it, now ducked her head and hurried past pews. Uncle Rick slunk around the grocery store like a man waiting to be recognized and humiliated. Jess moved 2 towns over, trying to escape the whispers. And Travis? Last I heard, he was still awaiting sentencing, facing the real possibility of prison time. I never responded to that letter. I didn't need to. My life got lighter, brighter, once I cut the rot away. Sometimes, I still pass by Aunt Carol's old house, now stripped of holiday lights and filled with empty echoes. Up for sale by auction sign creaks in the wind, the lawn overgrown and scraggly. I slow down just enough to take it all in. Not because I'm bitter, not because I'm vengeful, but because some lessons need to be remembered. The final nail in the coffin came 2 months later, right after the new year. The auction happened on a bitter, gray January morning. I didn't plan to go at first. I figured it would be better to move on, to let it all die quietly. But some part of me, the part that still carried every cold shoulder, every mocking laugh, every moment they made me feel small, needed to see it through. When I pulled up across the street from the house, the sight almost didn't look real. There was a small crowd gathered on the frostbitten lawn, hands stuffed into pockets, stomping their feet against the cold. An auctioneer in a heavy coat stood on the porch with a clipboard, calling out numbers like he was selling old furniture. And there they were, huddled on the curb in cheap jackets, faces red from the cold and the humiliation. Aunt Carol, Uncle Rick, Jess, even Travis, out on bail, looking 100 years older than he had at Thanksgiving. They weren't allowed inside anymore. They had no legal claim to anything. I watched as the final bid was called, way lower than the house's actual worth, and the gavel slammed down on the porch railing. Just like that, the last piece of the life they had stolen, manipulated, and built on selfishness was gone. They didn't even notice me sitting in my car until it was over. Aunt Carol's eyes caught mine across the street, and for a second, she just stared. No words. No theatrics. Just a woman who had finally realized that there was no apology, No guilt trip. No desperate grab that could undo the mess she had made. I gave her a small nod. Not cruel. Not gloating. Just final. And then I drove away, without looking back. No more voicemails. No more letters. No more ghostly reminders of people who only knew how to take. They faded out of my life like smoke, and I let them. I rebuilt quietly. It wasn't overnight. Trust takes time, even trust in yourself, but it was mine. I moved to a new apartment across town, started a new job that I loved, and surrounded myself with friends who didn't see me as a walking wallet but as someone worth caring about. Every Thanksgiving after that, I made my own traditions. Dinner with real friends, the ones who showed up without expectation. The ones who passed me the mashed potatoes because they wanted to, not because they needed something from me. And every year, as I carved the turkey and heard the laughter around the table, I felt nothing but peace. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just the quiet, solid knowledge that walking away and letting them fall by their own hands was the best thing I ever did. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't getting even. It's getting free. And I finally, truly was.